As we're talking about warfare, as we're talking about military and foreign affairs and whatnot, guess what happened in our great true north strong free country? As reported by ABC News, Canada bans more types of firearms and proposes donating guns to Ukraine. This is not even a joke. This is not even a joke. They want to take the weapons that I've heard people, repeating that line that, Stalin took the weapons, Hitler took the weapons, all these evil dictators took the weapons. And isn't it kind of ironic that those people took the weapons for their own militias, but Canada, we have such a great hospitality that we're going to sacrifice our weapons by force and then give it to actual neo-Nazis in Ukraine, one of the most corrupted regions in Eastern Europe. So great of us. Such a grand gesture. The Canadian government is outlawing another 324 firearm varieties, guns the public safety minister says belong on the battlefield, not in the hands of hunters or sport shooters. And who better to think that than the public safety minister, who is advancing for more warfare that would kill millions of innocent lives than just the handful of hunters that just want to shoot a turkey for dinner. Or shoot a bunch of pop cans with a BB gun. And I swear to God, I thought this was a literal joke. But it's actually happening. And here's the public safety minister. Here's Dominic LeBlanc pointing this out and stating that we're going to take your weapons. We're going to take the legally owned firearms that you went through all these challenges, that you went through all the situations to obtain them, and we're going to send them off to Ukraine. No questions asked. Listen to this.
Today, the government is adding a further 324 unique makes and models of assault-style firearms to the list of prohibited firearms in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. This means these firearms can no longer be legally used, sold, or imported in Canada, and can only be transferred or transported under extremely limited circumstances. As part of that process, the government of Canada has committed to the Ukrainian government to identify whether some of these guns could be donated to support the fight for democracy in Ukraine.
Give up our abilities to fight for democracy so we can send to a corrupt nation to fight for their autocracy, because they've already diminished all the democracy that was left in Ukraine. What little was left in 2014 is already gone. They've canceled elections. They've canceled their opposition. But sure, go send it to an actual neo-Nazi clan, a bunch of white supremacists, because hunters and gatherers and sportsmen are the real danger. I can't believe this. And let it stand on record, because I have said this numerous times, and I'll say this again. On record, I have been always on the fence when it comes to, guns and gun ownership and the Second Amendment, stuff like that. I've been back and forth so many times. I've been on, the side of guns, against guns, on the side of fixing the issue, on the side not, so on and so forth. I've been caught in these whirlwinds of, changing policies, and I think it's one of those things that effectively is a gray area. It's not a simple black and white position. But I will say this firmly, that throughout all this, I don't think we should ever have a ban. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why as we get into this article here. And I think there should be other measures in place. But here, let's get into the article here. From ABC News, it says, Canada said Thursday is outlawing another 324 firearm varieties. Guns the public safety minister say belong on the battlefield and not in the hands of hunters or sport shooters. Ottawa also said it is working with the government of Ukraine to see how guns can be donated to support the fight against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I can't. This is hysterical. So not only are they confiscating legal firearms that people have purchased, but they're also going to hustle that to actual Nazis. This is just amazing. This is just amazing. It's damaging and it's sad, and I can't believe this is happening, but it's hilarious, the moves that they're making to think that this is going to be beneficial to everybody. The move follows the May 2020 ban of 1,500 makes and models of firearms, a number that grew more than 2,000 by November of this year as new variants were identified. Is it like COVID? Is there going to be a new variant every month that they have to completely ban? The latest restriction announced Thursday by Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc follows expressions of concerns from gun control advocates that say many assault-style firearms were not included in the 2020 ban. This means these firearms can no longer be used, LeBlanc said. Defense Minister Bill Blair said Canada approached Ukraine authorities who expressed interest in some sort of the guns. Gee, you think? Hey, I'm just going to take this thing that people use to defend themselves, and I'm going to send it to a bunch of criminals. You might as well just steal from people's houses and then offer to sell that to people on the street that are causing, homicides daily in Toronto. Like, how crazy this is. How unbelievably crazy this is. But it gets worse. Every bit of assistance we can offer to Ukrainians is a step forward to their victory. Dear God. The federal government says it is working with provinces, territories, and police on planned buyback of prohibited weapons from individual users. Mass shootings are relatively rare in Canada. Note that. Just keep that in mind. Mass shootings are relatively rare in Canada, but the newly announced measures come on the eve of the 35th anniversary of the École Polytechnique in Montreal shooting, where a gunman killed 14 women before killing himself. The Ruger Mini 14 used by the gunman, Marc Le Pen, was among the weapons included in the 2020 ban. Nathalia Provost, a survivor who was wounded in the attack, said Thursday she was targeted for being a woman studying engineering. And let me just state the obvious in that statement, that happened 35 years ago. 35 years ago. Are people still targeting a woman studying engineering? Is that still going on today in 2024? Or are people more acceptable of that? So, using that as an excuse to ban legal firearms from hunters. Because, that is apparently dangerous to go out in the woods alone, not, causing havoc, not causing a mass genocide of individuals and life on Earth. Going out to the forest for sport or for food is apparently more dangerous. And that's why we got to ban all these handguns, ban all these rifles. That isn't actually effective. And again, I'll tell you why I'm principally against having this ban. You'll see why. These are just killing weapons, war weapons, military weapons. I'm so proud of that we're doing something, Provost said. Yeah, so military weapons that you're going to send to neo-Nazis. Again, that's the mind-boggling part of this. Is that, how dare we have these for hunters? Which, out of all the news reports I've seen of homicides and gun violence, not once have I ever heard a person who was a hunter becoming one of those people. Maybe it's because, hunters already have the ability to go out and peacefully, and I'm not a hunter myself, but I have hunters in my family that they go out and, shoot an animal instead of massacring a group of people. Now, some will say, don't shoot an animal. That's aside from that story, that's also controversial. Like I said, on a principle level, I'm against this ban. On a principle level, and you'll see why. Canada has a far fewer mass shootings than the United States, in part of the lack of easy access to guns, though the U.S. population also is far larger than Canada's. Officials have acknowledged guns smuggled into Canada illegally are often used by criminals. So, Wiretap Media pointed this out. So, they had this set up back in 2020. And ironically, it was right after the Uvalde, Texas shooting that happened many, many miles away from Canada. That was when we decided, hey, gun violence at some point is going to happen here, even though statistically it never has. And I think, this is a theory of mine. I think it's the fact that not only do we have basic healthcare coverage that people are able to be better off, they're not stressed about being medically bankrupt. I mean, those are one of the things. I think also the fact that, as bad as our media is here in Canada, it's not as worse as the United States. And I think media plays a huge factor into the mass amount of gun violence. The fact that we put people in this paranoid state, we're told that we have to hate each other, hate our neighbors, hate our friends and family. Half the country are a bunch of deplorables. Half the people are this. Black guys are this, and white guys are this and that, and the other. And we just put people in that state of mind that they're constantly in fear. They're constantly paranoid that they result to using a firearm to kill someone. So, again, this is something that I have been struggling to wrap around this. Like I said, I've been on the fence for many, many years. But I think on principle, I definitely agree with people's right to self-defend. And maybe that's why it's taken me so long to figure this out, is because of the fact that I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to use any sort of, rifle or firearm to protect myself. I have never had that situation in my life so far, knock on wood. But I know people that have had that situation. I know people that are, at a time and place, they have to resort to that for their safety, for security, to protect their family, to protect loved ones. So I think, personally, the principle that we should not be having these bans, that we should be, having, background checks so we can have a legal process to give them to law-abiding citizens. I think I agree with that. And I also think that instead of having this buyback program, especially to give to Ukraine of all people, we should be looking at specters to decrease the need for people to use handguns to defend themselves. I think we should be looking to measures to decrease the crime. Look into why people are so paranoid. Look into the media. Look into mental health. Because I always hear that all the time about school shootings, that it's about mental health. But they don't actually do anything about it. They don't investigate. They don't look into it. They don't look into the pharmaceutical industry that panders towards people that become suicidal and maniacs and sociopaths. They don't look into any of that. So that's my take of this. Anyway, so Wiretap Media says Trudeau's gun buyback program is a wealth transfer money laundering scheme. Because they stated that $75 billion or $75 million were spent on an agency to find these handguns, but none of them have brought in. Zero impact on gun crimes, 85% of guns coming from the United States. And this is one of the reasons that I understand why bans don't necessarily work. Because unless you have a global-wide ban, which will never come to be, because there's more guns per capita than there are people on this planet, there's never going to be an absolute zero gun violence situation. But there are many different ways we can decrease the violence. And that's what we should be looking. There's no absolute in this situation. Because no matter what areas you have a gun ban, there's always going to be someone that's going to harbor it from somewhere else. And like we're seeing here, a lot of these guns are coming from the United States. So here's the testimony here. The Standing Committee on Finance, and here's one of the conservative MPs. I think this is Raquel Kwando or something like that. Asking one of the ministers about this gun ban and stating the fact that you spent all this money and it has not turned out. You have not brought back the guns. Gun crime is continuing to skyrocket. I mean, go turn on Toronto News right now, and I'm sure there's probably a homicide right now as we're watching this. So take a look.
Your police union put out a number of concerning statistics, notably a 45% increase in shootings and a 62% increase in gun-related homicides just in the last year alone in Toronto. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And recently we've also learned that the Liberal government updated numbers is showing that currently the government's plan to confiscate lawfully owned firearms from the legal gun owner community is costing upwards of $75 million thus far, and yet not a single firearm has been purchased from a lawful owner. And in fact, no impact has been had, of course, on the criminals and illegal gun trade that's going on. Can you comment on what the Toronto Police Service would do with $75 million to combat gun violence?
$75 million would go a long ways. And I do want to comment that in Toronto, we're seeing that 85% of the firearms that are seized, and we seized 600 this past year, are from the U.S. We complete.
So this guy, this Clayton Campbell, he is part of the Toronto Police Association. So this is the guy that's supposed to be responsible for this gun buyback program. That they created this agency through the government of Canada. That's why they cost $75 million, because they have to create this agency. They have to hire a bunch of people. They probably built an office for them. And going through this list, going through the people who have legally purchased firearms for hunting or sport, which, I don't see a necessary reason why we're banning hunters and sportsmen or sportswomen, because there are female hunters. I'm not judging. Why we're doing this when we're not actually focusing on the issue of crime prevention, why we're not focusing on the issue of decreasing the amount of homicides. Because if we're banning law-abiding citizens, they're already not committing the crimes. So how is that going to make things better? And how is that going to make things more safer for here in Canada when you know for a fact that they're going to import a bunch of illegal firearms from the United States? So it just absolutely makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's absolutely backwards and insane. And the fact that they want to send all these law-abiding firearms off to a bunch of neo-Nazis. To do what? Slaughter more people. I thought we were trying to prevent deaths, gun violence. But apparently it's okay if we have gun violence overseas. It's okay if we have gun violence in Ukraine and kill more of those people. But no. We're going to take it away from hunters and people using it for sport. Holy crap.
Completely feel that the current gun ban buyback program has zero impact on crime in the city of Toronto, that it focuses on legal gun owners and not on the criminals committing offenses. And another thing that's so important is our bail reform. We are seeing repeat violent offenders time and time again firing illegal handguns in the streets of Toronto. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we've called upon the federal government time and time again to implement stricter bail for repeat violent offenders. And we're asking that again today.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And of course, your remarks a few weeks ago criticizing the Liberal Prime Minister for taking quite a strange, I would say, victory lap on social media about their so-called handgun freeze. You were quite direct in your criticism of that. And in fact, you said that it was offensive to police officers. And frankly, we've seen a number of other police associations join you from Surrey, BC to Hamilton, Ontario. So there's
Also, wouldn't it make more sense? Wouldn't it make more sense since they're talking about illegal transfer of firearms across the border? Wouldn't in your mind make the most judgmental sense to focus on border security then? Maybe instead of sending that weaponry to Ukraine, you send that to our armed military men and women in Canada here to defend our borders. That would be an actual smart idea. I wouldn't agree with that because you're taking away from the hunter and sportsman or sportswoman. But it'd be a lot more of a feasible sense and much more of a safer sense than to send it off to a bunch of neo-Nazis. That's just, I'm just stunned. I'm actually stunned that people in our government are that just psychotic that they would go to this level.
There seems to be a very widespread message that's coming loud and clear from police associations that the current tactics, of course, are not working to stop gun violence. And in fact, as you well know, gun violence in general across Canada over the last 9 years of Liberal government is up 116%, in addition to a general increase of violent crime of 50% in 9 years. And you're, of course, familiar that $75 million has been spent thus far, but Liberal government's own estimates put the confiscation regime from lawful firearms owners to be $1.8 billion, and in fact, the Fraser Institute has estimated it would be well over $6 billion.
So it just seems like, again, trying to put money onto this and just pandering towards, buzzwords and taking the firearms of hunters and sportsmen or women just seems the most counterintuitive to their intent, to the fact that they want to decrease gun crimes and gun violence on streets. It just seems absolutely chaotic and counterintuitive to then take all that, leaving Canadians feeling more burdened with rising crime rates, with the amount of homicides that are still increasing in a lot of metropolitan areas, and sending it out to another country so they can mass slaughter more people. Like, how crazy do you have to be to come up with that scheme? Well, speaking of crazy, here's Dominic LeBlanc again when he was asked about this at the House of Commons by a reporter. And again, just the absolutely most brainless thoughts. And I'm not, a big gun nut. I'm not saying this. Like I said, I have never had a need to fire a rifle or fire a handgun. I've never had that need. So that's maybe why I'm a bit biased against firearms. But again, the principal matter is the bans don't work, because unless there's a global-wide ban, unless they take all the guns in the world, which is absolutely impossible, shut down, gun manufacturers, war defense departments, and so on and so forth, it's never going to happen. It's never going to stop. But we can find ways to decrease elements of violence by looking into mental health, by looking into substance abuse, by looking at prevention of crimes. All this stuff we could be doing and putting our money towards and investing in Canada. Instead, we're just making it worse. But here's Dominic LeBlanc just making a complete ass of himself once again.
We got you here as well too. Last year there was talk of the gun buyback having a bit more concrete update in fall 2024. We're now into fall 2024. We've seen $67 million spent on the program, but no guns bought back. What's going on there?
So the good news is we're just at the beginning of the fall, actually. The summer just ended. I think I understand your impatience. I share that impatience. The good news is that...
What is it with... I swear to God, what is it with our politicians? And you see this with him, you see this with Freeland, you see this with Trudeau, you see this with a bunch of other people. The minute they are asked a question, a simple yes or no, or a simple, just give the answer question, they have to start off with this garbage. They have to start off with the small talk. Oh, I'm grateful you asked that question, Frank, and you really do ask a lot of good questions. Hey, the weather is really nice today. Look at the sun, the birds, and the clouds. Everything's so terrific today. Sorry, what was your question again? Why even bring this up? Who cares about the season it is? Who gives a crap? Why is that necessary in the response to this question? He's asking, you're wasting this money to buy back guns, and you have not bought back any of the guns. Why is that? It's a simple answer. It's a simple goddamn answer, but Dominic LeBlanc, just completely brainless, has to resort to this like small talk, talking about the weather and seasons, and such a great question. Let's hear this again.
What we've got here as well too. Last year there was talk of the gun buyback having a bit more concrete update in fall 2024. We're now into fall 2024. We've seen 67 million spent on the program, but no guns bought back. What's going on there?
So the good news is we're just at the beginning of the fall, actually. The summer just ended. I think I understand your impatience. I share that impatience. The good news is that those...
I share your impatience. I share your impatience. That's why I'm going to stall here and make a gobbledygoo to not answer this question. I share your impatience. That's one of the things that irritates me the most about these people. And you see this a lot, and not to be biased, but you see this a lot with the Liberal Party. You see this a lot in the liberal tactic sphere. That I feel your sympathy. I understand. I grew up middle class. I grew up working poor. I know how it is to feel. That's just complete garbage. That's just complete garbage to get you suckers to believe whatever they say, to convince you and use those play words to suck you in to this fabulous garbage. And here's his response to this.
Concrete steps that we spoke about in terms of buying back, retrieving, and disposing of those military-style assault weapons that have no place on the streets of Canada. That will begin in the next month and a half. We'll have more information, those concrete details that I know you're looking forward to in the coming weeks. But we're very much on track to fulfill that obligation we made to Canadians. A lot of work has been done. Those expenditures were precisely so that we can meet the obligations we made to Canadians in terms of those timelines, and I'm not pessimistic at all.
So next year, you expect guns to be starting the buyback process to begin within the next month and a half?
I will be announcing the details of the first phase of the program that will begin this fall as planned. So you shouldn't be pessimistic at all. We're very much on track in terms of those timelines. Mr. Duclos and I have done a lot of work in this regard, and I look forward to providing those details in the coming weeks, but to reassuring you that the commitments we made about starting to retrieve, buy back, and dispose of those guns this fall is very much on track. And the second phase of the program, as we said, will roll out. That's the individual buyback from Canadian gun owners. That will begin exactly as we said in 2025. So I'm not pessimistic about our ability to effectively deliver that program.
Oh my God. So that was obviously before the side hustle to sell it off to Ukraine. As he's saying, buy them back, destroy them. But we don't actually have a plan, so don't be pessimistic about me. Don't be critical about me. Let's talk about the weather again. The season's changing. Turn, turn, turn. Remember the song The Birds? Let's go to that. Let's talk, small talk. Let's not worry about this. So, I found this interesting. So this is the CCFR, which I think is it's kind of like a coalition for gun owners, the legal ones. And they said the Liberal incompetence on gun buyback. Not only did the Trudeau government fail to consult anyone before undemocratically banning 1,500 makes and models of legally acquired hunting and sports shooting rifles in May of 2020, the government's OIC legislation was so poorly written by Bill Blair and his office, it was caused an even bigger mess, says the consultant Wes Winkle of the CSAAA official, which I think that's the Sportsman Association. I could be wrong. Someone check that out. In 2022, Blair's successor, Marco Mendencio, told the Washington Post he hoped to launch the first phase of the program, buying back inventory from gun retailers by the end of the year before moving to the next phase, focused on private gun ownership in 2023. Now under the latest Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, with less than a month for the Liberals' second gun assembly period, which expires on October 30th, and after adding more models to the ban without any rationale or confiscation plan in place, Winkle says the Liberal Party is stuck trying to figure out how to deal with their own regulation. So they don't even know what the hell they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing. But they know that they spent $75 million to try to scare people that they're going to buy up your guns. And they have no plan in sight. They have no plan in sight. You just heard Mr. LeBlanc earlier saying, "Oh, well, it'll become, fall and maybe spring, maybe winter. Well, we'll draw something up." Well, nothing's been in place still. Nothing's been in place still, but they're still threatening Canadians to take their guns away and send it off to Ukraine. So here is, and by the way, did you know that Justin Trudeau made this statement back in 2010 when he was still an MP and wasn't even part of the Liberal Party? He was still a member of the Liberal Party, but he didn't become leader. And this is what he used to say back in 2010 about gun confiscation, the thing that he's doing right now.
First step towards registering your guns is just the first step towards taking away guns from everyone. That's never going to happen because here in Canada we have a culture that has grown up with guns and that respects the need to go out into the wilderness and shoot things from fear.
So let's hear that again.
First step towards registering your guns is just the first step towards taking away guns from everyone. That's never going to happen because here in Canada we have a culture that.
So he says it's never going to happen. We're not going to take away your guns because we've built a culture that Canadians are using these guns legally to sport or to hunt, which is exactly what they're taking away from Canadians. Under this guy, Justin Trudeau. And he said this back in 2010, back when he had his fro. He was going through the Bob Ross phase, I guess. That's what he said in 2010. And now here we are in 2024, where they're determined to take as many legal firearms off from Canadians who went through the loops and legal troubles to obtain those firearms and send them off to a bunch of neo-Nazis. To do what? To cause more mass murder, which is something they're trying to prevent here in Canada. It seems so diabolical and ridiculous because it's not actually going to decrease crime. It's going to make things worse for people, and you're going to take it away from hunters. So, I end with this because this is hilarious. So, this is from Justin Trudeau's Ego. He has a funny Twitter account here. And it says, footage from just been released of Russian officials discussing my gun confiscation and plans to send the weapons to Ukraine. And they're laughing at me. Sure, I'm sending World War II rifles to a modern war, but I really hope world leaders will start taking me seriously. And there's the video of Vladimir Putin laughing at the fact that we are sending hunting rifles to already dead Ukrainians to fight against a superpower that has nuclear arsenal. This is Canada, folks. This is Canada, folks. And like I said, this is something that I've been back and forth on so many times. I've been around, for and against it so many times. I think mostly because personally, I just don't have the need. I don't have the whims. I don't have the necessity to purchase a firearm to go shoot and do the stuff they're doing. But I understand I don't want to take that away from people. I have hunters in my family. My grandfather was a hunter, which is probably the only reason I knew about, rifles and guns, the very little knowledge I have about it. And I don't want to take that away from my family members. I don't want to take that away from anybody. Especially the fact that we already have legal positions already in place so that people can buy legal firearms for themselves. And if it's in a legal matter, they're allowed to partake on that. What we should be doing and this is what I've been stating, is that we should be looking into ways to decrease the crimes, doing crime prevention, finding ways to decrease the rate of homicides, not by the confiscation of legal firearms, but looking into ways of mental health, looking into ways of substance abuse, looking at border security, considering that most of these weapons are coming illegally from the United States. So we should be increasing border security, looking into mental health, looking into poverty, looking into how the media has foliated people into these deranged tensions. Look at pharmaceutical drugs that have turned people into sociopaths. All these measures that we're completely ignoring to just go down the stupidest route possible. And all this is doing is diminishing Canada's ability to self-defend itself, which at principle, I always respect people's way to self-defend themselves, regardless of how they do it. Again, personally, I've never had the necessity to fire a firearm or whatever, but I'm not going to take that away from people. But this is Justin Trudeau, his government, his pathetic public safety minister who cares less about public safety but wants to send it off to Ukraine, to send it to a bunch of neo-Nazis to go mass slaughter more people. How exactly is that safe for anybody?